You're listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajan, making the real estate journey accessible to anyone.
All right, guys, today we're here and we are going to discuss how to analyze a deal. And that is what we're going to cover in this episode. Hopefully we'll give you a little few nuggets here. And I'm here with my buddy Sajan. How you doing, bud?
Doing well, man. What's that?
Where you at?
I'm in a construction zone, buddy. We're doing some renovations in the kitchen. And so I figured just in case if it gets really loud, I don't want it to disrupt. So I'm like in my closet right now. I got this beautiful gray sheet as my backdrop. It's working out. I kind of like it. You might see more of this. It's like a nice little cocoon to do this show in, you know?
I thought you were gonna come in with a green screen, and I was like, dude, that's gray. It's not gonna work.
It ain't gonna work. Nah. Yeah, it's just it's a little bit noisy out there, so I figured I'd go to a quieter spot. But yeah,
nice.
But yeah, I think it's good. Like it's kind of cool to see the process of renovation. I've done it at rental properties before, but like when you're living in it, we've done it in our bathroom, but the kitchen is kind of like the heart of the home. So when that's kind of out of whack, it kind of throws everything out of whack. But we're getting there.
Good. So progress is being made, huh?
Yep. Thank goodness, man. It's coming along.
100%.
Yeah.
Good to hear. How's everything else? Anything else going down?
Nah, man, same old stuff. Just looking for deals and trying to see what the market looks like. It's hot. Like things that are, if it's a deal, and like I'm shooting myself in the foot by just looking at MLS, but if it's a good deal, it goes up real fast. Like it's crazy. But you still got to look and kind of keep your finger on the pulse. You know what I mean? Like just to know what's out there, what is a good deal, what's a bad deal. So I'm always looking. But yeah, it's good. How about you, man? How's everything going?
Same here, brother. We, obviously we kind of came out of the winter storm, and we're just kind of, we weren't impacted as bad, but same with you, man. Like just kind of looking for deals and anything that's even worth looking at MLS wise. People are just yanking it up off the charts. It's quick, and people are just buying it sight unseen. A lot of them,
right?
So
it's crazy, man. It's crazy, but like it kind of gets you on your game as far as like I need to be more aggressive or I need to do a different strategy. Like it's good to be nimble, and like these kind of situations kind of force you to be nimble, right? So it's not bad. It's just sharpening the axe.
That's what it is. That's the name of the game. Get into it. You have to actually get into it, whatever it is.
That's right.
All right. So with that said, we'll jump into this episode, and basically we're talking about analyzing deals. Episode 5, we kind of mentioned on what the actual costs are that you have to kind of consider outside of your mortgage and your interest. There's a lot of things that you got to consider cost wise, because a lot of people go into these deals and say, hey, let me buy this $150,000 house. All I have to pay is my mortgage and my interest. And that's not the case. And according to, if you ever want to refer back to episode 5 and see some of those costs, today I think we're going to basically analyze those costs and give a breakdown. I think a lot of people, if you put some color around it by adding some numbers, perspective, people can get a better picture on what we're looking at when you analyze a deal.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I know for me, for example, it's good to hear theory. Theory is fine, but like getting into the meat of things and knowing someone's numbers and knowing what a deal actually looks like what am I really looking at? How am I supposed to really do this? Like that helps me a lot whenever really anything. Like if I'm researching something on YouTube, if I'm trying to build something, seeing someone build it is way better than hearing the theory behind how to build whatever I'm building, right? So I guess with all that said, can you break down like in simple terms like what this analysis is really all about?
That is a great segue, Saj, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to break down the cost and the industry. Actually, if you get into rental business, and I've kind of mentioned this to you, is they use what's a benchmark, what's called a 1% rule. And what that means is it's an easy way to gauge if you're quickly looking at deals, right? You want to eyeball something really quick. If you're buying $100,000 house, make sure you can at least get a 1% of the purchase price in rent in the area, right? So it's a good way to check and balance. Hey, if I'm going to buy this $100,000 house, will I get at least $1,000 in rent in that area? And usually, generally, most cases, I won't say all markets and all that stuff, but Most areas that'll cover your principal, your interest, and all the costs that we're about to talk about today. So that's what the 1% rule is. And we'll basically put that on and show you with the analysis of a deal that we're going to do.
Right. And just to kind of add on to that, it's just a go by. It's not the end all be all. Like if you're not exactly at 1%, or if you're lucky enough to get way more than 1%, like that's awesome. But it's just a rough gauge to quickly analyze the deal. And like you might be wondering, like, well, how do I know how much rents go for and stuff like that? Personally, just to throw it out there, what I do is I go on har.com and kind of look at what houses are for sale. And then in that same area, I say, how much do rents go for that area too? And it kind of gives you a quick, like down and dirty type of way of just figuring out, like, is it 1%? Is it less? Is it something that I could, knock out? But yeah, it's just really just to go by. It's not the end all be all, but it's just something to give you some kind of footing to know if it's a good deal or not.
Great point. And there's multiple resources. HAR is a great one. Zillow is actually really good. They do a lot of Zestimates and on rent, purchase price. So there's multiple ways you can actually go about looking for your property, depending on where you're at.
Yep, that's right.
All right, so let's get into it. So this is an example of a deal that we're going to analyze. So I just called it 1234 Main Street. I just created the spreadsheet, and again, I'm willing to share this. It's a very simple Excel spreadsheet that I just keep as a template for me. And I think Sajan does something similar whenever he analyzes deals. It's something quick that you can plug in your numbers and basically get what you need to get out of it to make sure that the deal that you're looking at or the house you're looking at is worth buying. So all I did is just plug in my house price. We're going to deal with a $150,000 house. And generally, based on that 1% rule, I like to just plug in $1,500 to say we're going to get that in rent, hopefully in the area. And now some of the expenses that a lot of people don't take into account is obviously house insurance, right? You buy a house, you make sure you got to have insurance on the house. That's first and foremost. If the thing burns down or gets flooded, somebody's got to cover you for your investment. So make sure you have insurance. And again, you'll find out what your base benchmarks for these costs are as you buy a house, and you can maybe even be able to do that based off your base house. But I just plugged in about $100 a month, which equates to about $1,200 for the year. So again, you can break this down by month, by annual cost, but whatever works for you. So I just broke all these costs out by month. HOA fees, again, that's going to vary from house to house. It's going to vary. So your HOA fees, I factor that in. The taxes are huge. A lot of people forget to take into fact the taxes. If you're in a good school district, those things are super expensive and pricey. So make sure you get the full year's tax price, break it down by month, and then plug that into this spreadsheet here. And then again, I think we mentioned CapEx, which is any capital expenditures that you could see long-term, roof, any kind of plumbing, things like that. We just want to take into account for that. So again, you don't have to, depending on if it's a new house, you may not have to do that. Older houses, you probably do have to plug something in. Just have something as a reserve whenever you're factoring in these costs. And then any rehab, if you think that there's if it's an older property, you've got to pump some initial money in the short term, I'd put some money aside for that as well. Down here, I actually just used a mortgage calculator and just said, hey, if it's a $150,000 house, I put 20% down. And what's my principal and interest based on the interest that's out there right now? And it's about 572, right? So the total expenses, including all these expenses that we really don't think about. And again, there's some I added in there like lawn, property management. Again, if you have a property manager, make sure you take those costs. The whole point of this spreadsheet is to make sure you have every cost accounted for.
Right.
So I didn't put those in there. I ended up with about $1,238. In this top quadrant up here, if you look at it, you take your rent, subtract that, and your monthly cash flow is about $261 a month. And it could be more if you're not allotting for CapEx or a rehab and things like that. It could be more. So this bottom quadrant down here is basically what you're putting up front to acquire the property. So if you have a $150,000 house, generally it's about $20,000 to get in. But if you're buying it, you may put less, right? Meaning to live in it, it may be less. So whatever your down payment is, I put about 1%, about 3% for closing costs, which equates to about $4,000. If there's a rehab budget, again, upfront, I put that in there as well. And what this gives you actually is your rate of return. So all I did was your annual cash flow, which is the 261 times 12, and then divided that by your total upfront investment. So this is basically telling you how much money you're getting back on the money you invested in the house upfront. So 8 to 10, maybe even 12% is a really good range to be in. The way I kind of look at it, this is if you put your money in a bank account today, you're not going to get anywhere near that.
Right. So basically what Siju was able to explain was just a real quick down and dirty. A lot of this were estimates, which is fine. I feel like it's just kind of what it is. You kind of have to have some type of go by, but you could quickly type in some of these numbers when you're looking at properties, run your analysis and say, oh, with this property, I could potentially earn 8 point whatever percent on my money. And then you could question that money that's sitting in the bank. It's only earning like less than 1%, less than it's just horrible, right? So then you can make that decision and say, all right, I know that this is generally what it's going to be. Let me go for it. Or if the numbers work out to where you're not making anything, then you know to move on, right? So it's just good to know, to be able to look at the numbers and kind of say, hey, this is a good deal or this is not a good deal.
Yep. Great point, Saj. And it's about awareness, right? I mean, more than anything, if you don't know what you're getting into, the worst case scenario is you could buy a house that's way under, it's undervalued, you're not making money on it. And in some cases, that you don't want to get yourself into a situation where you can't handle it, right? So in some cases, you may owe a little bit of money at the end of if you're paying 1,500 rent and you're only getting 1,450, you may be able to float it as a person and your finances, right? But it's good to be aware, and that's the whole point of this exercise when you analyze a deal. And this is what I go through. I know Sajan kind of has something similar, but for me, it just kind of shows me how valuable is the asset I'm pulling or I'm buying from a house perspective.
And you're totally right. Like I actually have something very similar to this as well, where it's just a spreadsheet where I could quickly look at a deal, pull out the numbers and just type them in. And then it self-populates and says, hey, this is a good deal or this is not a good deal. Going back to the whole, how much your margins are. I think we talked about in a prior episode, how we started in real estate. And so the first property that I bought was the house that we lived in, that we purchased. And then when we converted that into a rental property, I was paying out of my pocket $50 every month, which was not a fun thing to do, but in the grand scheme of things, it was great. And so at that time, I was getting zero rate of return. Like there was no profits coming. I was actually paying, but over time, as time progressed, I built up more equity in that property, and then it turned into a 1% deal. It turned into actually it's greater than a 1% deal now. So like just because it's a quote unquote bad deal now doesn't mean it can't convert into a good deal later. But again, going back to what Siju was saying earlier, it's about awareness. It's about knowing what you're getting yourself into before you fully dive in. And so I think that's what's really important about being able to do an analysis on any property that you're going to dive into.
And I think the beauty of the exercise, and I think you have it down to a science and I have it down to a science in the sense that you analyze so many deals that you already know a lot of the numbers anyway, right? So it may be new to somebody that's freshly looking at these numbers and these spreadsheets, but I'll be honest with you, I know what the numbers generally will look like because we've done it a few times, and that helps, right? It's like practice makes perfect. I tell my kids, right? So the more you analyze and the areas that what rent's going to come for and those kind of items, you'll easily go through this process quickly. It may be cumbersome in the beginning, but it's going to turn into a routine. And
it's kind of like what you were saying before. Actually, I think I mentioned it earlier in the show. Got to sharpen your axe. And the more properties you analyze, you just get better and you just start knowing. And I think we talked about this before, but I kind of look at a certain zone of where I want to invest in. And so when a new property comes up, I already kind of know like, oh, that's a good deal. And then I run my analysis and stuff like that. It's because I've done essentially years and years of doing this analysis. There's hundreds of homes that I've ran an analysis on that I never even like thought to purchase, because after I ran my analysis, I realized, hey, that's not a good deal. Let's keep moving. But like you said, practice makes perfect. And I would encourage anybody and everybody, if you're getting serious about real estate, you should really just start looking at properties. It costs you nothing. It costs nothing to run an analysis. It costs nothing to create a spreadsheet and to run these numbers and try to figure out like, is this a good deal or not? And then when you do get money, you're in a position to just make it happen rather than like, oh, now what do I do? So yeah, like I think the stuff that Siju was sharing is extremely valuable in that you could really know what's a good deal and what's not.
What, bringing that on, I guess, what is there anything else you could think of? I mean, those are some of the everyday ticket items that I always think about when you, right? Is there
Sure.
any other costs that you could think of that you could think of that a potential investor can go through as they go through their cycle of investing?
Right, right. And so I'll churn out a few. I don't want it to be like a deterrent because like everything is solvable. There's an answer for everything if you dig deep enough, right? So looking at your spreadsheet, I kind of noticed, and I don't account for this either, so it's not like a bad thing or not. But there's vacancies that need to be considered. That's essentially like when someone moves out of your place. If you don't have someone lined up immediately, which is not always the case, you might not, it might be a couple of months, right? You got to account for that rent. I mean, the mortgage, because you still have to pay the mortgage even though someone's not living there. So you should create some type of cushion for yourself. And whether that's on a monthly basis where you're saving on a monthly basis, what I personally do is I have I've earmarked a certain amount of money per property to give me that peace of mind, knowing that like if something went down, I could tap into this money to keep the house. So I don't want to lose the house, right? So vacancies is one thing. Legal fees would be another thing to consider. And when I say legal fees, I'm like, there's potential that you might have an eviction, right? And if there's an eviction, there's lawyers involved and stuff like that. Thankfully I've never had to deal with that. I've been doing it for 10-ish years, and I haven't had to do an eviction. But those are real things. So you might want to allocate some money for that as well. Also, like on the purchase of the property for legal fees, there's closing costs and stuff like that. So that's something to consider. I think that was actually on your spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Another thing to deal with is realtor fees. So that's kind of baked into the closing costs when you're talking about purchasing a property. But personally, I use a realtor to find tenants because it's invaluable to have like a good tenant in your house. And I just trust my realtor so much. And there's a cost associated to that. But for me, I'll gladly pay that cost. So that's something you should consider too if you're going to go that route. You could find it yourself, like you could save your money doing that way. But for me, there's sometimes it's better to just get the pro to get the good tenant in there and do all the background checks and stuff like that. So that's a fee. The last thing I could think about would be like turnover costs. So talking about someone moving out, there's potential for, well, there's definitely the cleaning fee that you have to consider. There's potential for repairs and things like that. So there's no way of knowing, right? And how much it's really going to be until they move out. So again, like me personally, I like to earmark some money. So I know like once they move out, I have enough money to be able to do that. But those are just some costs that should be considered, when you're running your numbers, like to either if you have a big bank load, you have like a bunch of money where you could, deploy it when you need it. That's great. If you don't, you could just work it into your monthly numbers and say, as the months progress, I need to save because this might happen. Turnover might happen. Vacancies might happen. Legal fees might happen. And so again, it's just about awareness and knowing that, you're ready for whatever comes your way.
Oh yeah, turnover for sure. Somebody that lives in a house, obviously, you got to at least get it cleaned at the very least.
There's wear and tear, regular wear and tear.
Yep.
Like the little chain on your toilet, that thing breaks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a small cost, but it's a thing. So you have to consider that. So there's definitely wear and tear.
Wear and tear, and then I agree with you on the vacancies, because at the end of the day, you still got to pay the mortgages.
Yeah.
So and again, as you go through the process, you'll feel a comfort knowing you'll have it's almost like a routine with these things,
right?
So like you have a earmarked amount for each house. Like those kind of things are things you put in place as a system, right? It's something that comes with just doing. You have to kind of go through the process to kind of get some of this going. So
yeah, for sure.
I agree with you on all that.
Yeah, I think like you're saying, like diving in is great. Like you want to know, you don't want to have analysis paralysis though. So I think we're saying all these things, and it might freeze some people up, but please don't let it freeze you up, because like you can't go wrong. Like this is such a forgiving business in the sense that like if you buy something and if you overpaid, you could wait a little bit and the market will readjust for you. Or you could rent it out for a long time, or you could live in it yourself. There's so many different avenues where you could still get in the game and get like the knowledge you need. It's very forgiving. Like, I mean, we are talking about big numbers. Like when we talk about, I forgot what the down payment was on the one. I think you said 20,000, right?
30,000.
30,000, that's not chump change, you know, like, so I get it that it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's still very doable.
The benefits outweigh the cost in the long run. To me, it just makes total sense for, and you and I are on the same page, and we just get that, because you can't look at it short-sighted. You may forget to account for vacancies 1 month. It is what it is, and it's just, you got to learn from that, right? And that's, if you don't go through it, the mistakes that you make, you will never learn from them.
No, that's true. That's true. Like the best thing to do is to dive into it. But our hope is that we would paint a picture a little bit broader, so you could be more aware than we were when we first started. Like when we first started, when we turned our first house into a rental and we moved, that was my first real experience of like dealing with everything. And so that's why I was negative $50 a month. I had to pay out of my pocket, because I was like, all right, well, I don't know. I'm just kind of diving in. Right. But it was, again, like the business is very forgiving. And over time, that was like my most profitable house. And to be honest, that house allowed me to buy another house later on. Right. So like, we can't look at the day one of a property and say, this is the end all be all, because everything changes. The markets grow, markets come down a little too, but even when the markets come down, it's forgiving. Like, you have an ability to still survive.
Agreed. And with that, I'd like to wrap this segment up by saying, you have to, next to just jumping in and doing it, meaning getting into the real estate business, if that's what you're interested in, and kind of doing that as an investment, the second biggest thing to me, I think, is running the numbers. You have to, I think it's important, right? I mean, at the very least, that you know what you're getting yourself into. You're not surprised, if something comes up down the line. It's very important to do that. And hopefully this gave you a more of just a baseline, a template to follow. And again, you can cut and slice and dice the cost however you want, right? And I'm sure Saj probably has a little things that are different from what I do and what other people do. But this is just more of just a template, is more of what we're trying to just give you.
Right. And I 100% agree with Siju. It's just analyzing the deal is extremely important. I mean, it doesn't trump diving in, really doing it yourself, like buying a property and like learning, but take your hits. But I would highly encourage, if anyone watching is even barely considering going into real estate, I would highly encourage you, just start looking at properties. It costs you nothing. Just start looking and start analyzing these properties to see, like, what do I need to look out for? What is a good price? What is good rent? And these are things that are accessible, like at our fingertips. Literally, we just search the web and like, is this something that I could actually do? Like, what is 20% of this house? Like what is that number? And then you could kind of reverse engineer it to see like how doable it is for you to actually make happen. So this is like extremely valuable.
You hit it right on the point. I mean, it gives you some idea of what you need to go in with as far as where your finances should be. And I completely and 100% agree. With that said, I guess we can wrap up this session. Sajan, you can come out of the closet whenever you want. It's okay.
I'm gonna stay here. This is very comfortable. That's funny, man.
But thanks again, brother. It's always good seeing you. We're gonna wrap up this episode. I think it was a good one. Hopefully, comment, like if you need anything else. If you need the spreadsheet that I use, more than welcome. I'll upload it if you need that. And hopefully you guys tune in later. Thanks, Saj.
Thank you, Siju, man. Appreciate you, man. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajan. Be sure to tune in next time.